Good morning. This is Mr. Coleman coming at you from my basement office. We're going to talk today about the geography of ancient Rome and the ancient Romans. Now, remember that Rome is a city in Italy now, and we tend to think of this as a country, but it wasn't a country really. It would become an empire, but what I want to talk about is the land. Okay, so here's the city of Rome, right here. You notice that it's at the end, the mouth of the Tiber River. Okay, so it's on this boot. The the peninsula of Italy is sort of shaped like a boot that's kicking Sicily. So this is the island of Sicily down here. You'll notice that this is Africa. This is where Carthage was. Tunis is the capital of Tunisia, and this is about 350 miles, which sounds like a lot, but compared to almost everywhere else, this is one of the closest spots between Europe and Africa until you get over to Spain, which is only a couple of miles. But this was an issue because they fought several wars, the Romans and the Carthaginians. We're going to talk about that. But the other thing you should notice is that over here is Greece. So the Greeks started over here, and they were only really separated by water. Notice that there's all kinds of mountains that at the top of the boot, except for through here, you've got these really big mountains called the Alps. Okay, so if you've ever heard of Switzerland or you've ever heard of the Italian or the Swiss Alps, there are some pretty tall, pretty steep mountains that stopped a lot of easy travel between the rest of Europe and Italy. So that if you were going to attack the Romans, you probably needed to do it by sea, which, if you have a good navy, then you're pretty safe. So there's definitely a lot of naval battles in Roman history. Okay. And you'll see too that down the middle of the boot, you've got these mountains. So even if you get over here, then you've got to get through the mountains to get to Rome. So for a while, Rome was sort of like this little chunk of safety between some Greek colonies down here and down here, and the Etruscans, Etruria, up here in places like Florence and Bologna, if you like your bologna. And you might remember Venice. Italian name for Venice is Venezia. So this is northern Italy. This is what the Po River, named after the bear from Kung Fu Panda. Just kidding. It's actually named after the Teletubby. Just kidding. Uh, you see that the geography of the Italian peninsula made it possible for Rome to sort of hide from everybody. We talked about Alexander the Great, and you'll remember that Alexander the Great started in Greece over here and went east. He attacked the Persians. Alexander the Great could have gone west. And at that time, the Romans were not super powerful. He could have easily crushed the Romans and destroyed them from history. No one would have ever heard or cared about the Romans if Alexander the Great had gone the other way. So that's one of those what if questions. Instead, the Romans were sort of sitting pretty over here, and Alexander the Great went over and took on the Persians, and the Romans were like, huh, that's interesting. And eventually, one of their most famous leaders, Julius Caesar, would say, I really want to be like Alexander the Great. Literally, he said that. He cried when he realized he found a statue of Alexander the Great and said, dude, this guy did more by the time he was 33 than I ever will. Which was true at the time, but Julius Caesar turned out sort of okay. Anyway, water mountains and a little safe corner, or a little, I guess you could say they were like a little bump on the kneecap of the boot or the leg of the Italian peninsula. And that sort of let them hide for a while. They would eventually get wrecked by a whole bunch of people. Those mountains didn't stop everybody forever, but they allowed Rome to turn into a big deal. So the big lesson of geography here is two things. Number one, it protected Rome for long enough that they could grow into a powerful city state. And two, it connected them to the Mediterranean in a way where they were sort of in the middle of stuff and they could take over most of the Mediterranean world. The Roman Empire was mostly about the Mediterranean and how can we attack and take over all over the Mediterranean because of our really strong navy to support things. Thank you.